In at number 10, Miley Cyrus. Miley's pretty much been besties with controversy since her early teen days, transitioning from Disney's biggest star of her era to pop culture's most scandalous it girl. So when the singer sat down for the notoriously unfiltered podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, to take part in a 3-hour discussion with its host, the equally candid superstar dished everything one could think of. Eager fans were tuned in to witness Miley's brutally honest revelations, from roasting Joe himself to uncovering some unfiltered truths like her divorce process and how she's been branded cold-hearted by exes for treating them as if they don't exist. Miley did not hold back. In fact, the Hollywood icon did exactly what was expected of her. And we have her most highlighted moments that could be argued as controversial ready for your awaiting ears. As per Pop Crave, Miley informed Joe how she believed her singing was elevated after she and Liam Hemsworth lost their old house to a fire. On top of the admission prior, the singer revealed how her split from Liam sucked and was far from what people assumed. Then Miley also got into her fallout with the VMAs over a stage issue, dishing to Joe about how the directors for her performance made disrespectful comments towards her after she asked to be treated like any other male performer. Not an artist to ever shy away from seeing her creative desires being met thoroughly, Miley was unabashed when she admitted how the VMA directors came for her for their attempt to stage her performance with a beauty light. After requesting the light be removed due to hindrance, Miley stated they told her, "You want to be treated and lit like a guy, we wouldn't be dealing with this if a guy was doing it." Before we break down the rest of today's list, be sure to tap our notification bell for more celebrity content, as it really helps our channel. In at number 9, Elon Musk. Elon's former but still ongoing Twitter battle for dominance most recently seen him suing Microsoft over the company pulling Twitter's ads from their platform. But this big boss is no stranger to scandals, and this was only one of many. Between fraud and a series of other allegations, Elon's best skill outside of manufacturing electric vehicles and producing spaceships is making headlines. He's normally really good at rising from falling, but has been relatively quiet on his end, as not a lot of people still talk about or share news on him. He's had run-ins with East and Southeast Asian countries like China and Thailand and the government, accusations of fostering toxic, racist, and sexist working environments thrown at him, and engaged in feuds with the general public over why he feels the need to throw money at everything. And that's not even half of the things he's actually done. So while these problems may never truly get rid of Elon entirely, it also doesn't stop the massive hits to his career that comes with it. In at number 8, Kanye West. We know how much Ye was widely condemned for his less recent slew of anti-Jewish comments. However, much like the others on today's list, this rapper holds even more priors of making controversial remarks. Right after his public hate comments, Ye defended his actions by stating, "Black people are actually Jew also," adding, "You guys toyed with me and tried to blackball whoever opposes your agenda." He also accused recording producer Diddy of being controlled by, quote, "the Jewish people." Naturally, many people criticized his remarks and several brands severed their ties with him. Celebrities were also quick to speak out against the rapper for his then actions. But before this, Ye made several other comments deemed hateful, including suggesting that slavery was by choice and referring to the health shot during unprecedented times as the mark of the beast. There was also the White Lives Matter issue and his public vocal support for former US President Donald Trump outside of the aforementioned. And we didn't even talk about Taylor Swift. However, to save us all time and our eyes rolling white, we shall move right along. In at number 7, Kevin Hart. I'm sure we all know what controversy is coming because since it occurred, it's been deemed as one of his worst. And that's saying a lot given who exactly we're talking about. From a controversy that kicked off in 2018 and got dragged into 2020, Kevin once stepped away from his opportunity to host the 2019 Academy Awards after the announcement was met with intense backlash. He suggested removing himself from the show after a handful of his other homophobic tweets suddenly resurfaced. His history of being openly homophobic didn't help, especially when he announced in 2015 interviews that he was doing so for the sake of comedy. So when the world discovered he'd be hosting the 2019 Oscars, he and the Academy saw immediate hate. Within minutes, Twitter users were digging up his older tweets and jokes to repost them while stating his actions lacked apologies and should not be rewarded. Even more, on December 6, 2018, Kevin uploaded an Instagram video refusing to apologize. However, the next day, his official statement of stepping down from the event came, and he apologized to those he offended. Since the comedian attempted to discuss the issue in numerous statements, appearances, social media posts, and even through his Kevin Hart Don't F This Up Netflix docuseries. He broke down the Oscars controversy amid several other public issues he was going through at that time. In at number 6, Post Malone. Not much has been heard of Post recently, ever since the scandal that nearly took out his entire career. He's been on a rather calm, backseat type of vibe since. Still, back in November 2017, the singing rapper was labeled a culture vulture and faced several accusations of appropriation. Post ended up responding to the backlash backlash of his then most recent problematic hip-hop comments, addressing the hate surrounding his Rolling Stone interview where he suggested to fans looking for life-inspiring lyrics not to listen to hip-hop music. The Sunflower artist further claimed he was a target of reverse racism within the genre. Following the article's publishing, Twitter users expressed their disapproval. Entirely aware of the months of culture appropriation accusations Post was seeing ahead of the interview. Post eventually clapped back to the criticism by posting a Twitter video explaining his headspace, noting how the comments were seemingly taken out of context during a drinking interview. Quote, "A lot of people are saying I don't appreciate hip-hop or I'm taking advantage of hip-hop. What I was trying to say is that there are a lot of people saying the same ish, not saying anything super meaningful. Never once did I say that I don't appreciate hip-hop. I'm just trying to keep living and make the music I love."
At number 5, we have the Oscars jokes. Jimmy hosted the 2017 Oscars and many people were not happy with the jokes he made. When actor Mahershala Ali won an Oscar for Best Actor in a Supporting Role, Jimmy thought it would be a good idea to poke fun at his name. While the actor was probably internally celebrating his award, as well as his newborn daughter at the time, Jimmy said that with a name like his, he can't name his daughter just Amy. One Twitter user expressed their disgust for the joke, saying, "You've received the greatest honor of your career and immediately after a white man reminds you that you are different." The talk show host also had a prank segment where he tricked a bus full of tourists to attend the Oscars. He found another opportunity to make fun of ethnic names when he asked one Asian woman for her name, to which she said it was Yulri. Then when he asked for her husband's name, which was Patrick, Jimmy said, "See, that's a name." Another Twitter user made fun of Jimmy, saying, "Kimmel is so baffled by non-Anglo names like Mahershala and Yulri," which earned a handful of likes in agreement. At number 4, we have Tyler Perry, who exposed Jimmy. Sometime early last year, the filmmaker made a guest appearance on the talk show and had a moment similar to that one awkward interview exchange between Dakota Johnson and Ellen. Jimmy brought up the brand new studio Tyler had opened, which brought up a party invitation Jimmy had ignored. There was a big party celebrating the studio's opening, and Tyler invited Jimmy only for him not to show up. Jimmy tried to use the lockdown as an excuse, but this party was way before the world shut down. He then came up with another excuse, trying to appear humble, and said that he assumed the invitation was for Jimmy Fallon. But Tyler was quick to point out the invitation had said Jimmy Kimmel and included a whole video requesting his attendance. And to make things worse, Jimmy had actually acknowledged the invite and promised to send a gift at least, but there was no gift. While it was a conversation in mostly good faith, Jimmy wasn't making himself look any better. Next up, we have the interview with Roseanne Barr. She had appeared on the talk show to help promote the reboot of Roseanne, a hit family sitcom from the 80s. But the conversation took a turn and became all about politics, which was not what the audience was looking forward to. They discussed her habit of excessive tweeting that made no sense, her political views, and the time she ran for president in 2012. While the interview got laughter and applause, I wouldn't be surprised if most of it was because they kinda had to. Viewers were unhappy with the interview as they felt like the vibe was ruined. They were waiting to hear more about the Roseanne reboot and not about her reaction to Trump's presidential win. One user said, Kimmel insisted on talking about politics when Carr was clearly trying to behave and promote her show. That was cringeworthy regardless of your political stance. The show in question ended up getting cancelled after one season following her xenophobic tweets. At number 2, we have the time he played back Joaquin Phoenix's outtake. So Jimmy and Joaquin were discussing the actor's infamous role as the Joker when Jimmy played an outtake for the audience. Things were very intense, as you can tell by Joaquin's demeanor. The actor was clearly irritated and fed up, if his swearing at the staff was anything to go by. He was seen cussing out at Larry, whom he revealed was one of the movie's cinematographers, for calling him Cher, implying that Joaquin was being a total diva on set. Once the clip finished, the actor was clearly caught off guard and embarrassed. He apologized to the audience for witnessing him in that moment, but the fans applauded him. Fans were not happy though that Jimmy had even unveiled this to the public to begin with, as they thought he was trying to get the public to view Joaquin differently. And finally, at number 1, we have the I told my kids I ate all their Halloween candy segment. Now, I'm sure you've seen at least one of these types of videos floating around the internet, and honestly, they're funny, you can't even lie. But some users don't think so, claiming that the video challenge aimed for a good laugh is at the cost of children's trauma, which I don't think it's that serious, especially because most of the videos, if not all, have the parent come clean and show that they didn't actually eat all of their Halloween candy. Even Jimmy tried to end things and skip the tradition altogether in 2020, but parents continued on anyways. It's a harmless joke, really, so may the tradition live on.
At number 10, the slap. Regardless of how people saw him before, at the 2022 Oscars, we got to see a side of Smith that we normally don't, and it was not a good side for him to show off. By now, I think we all know exactly what happened at the award show last year. Host of the show, Chris Rock, made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith looking like G.I. Jane due to her being bald. After making the joke, most of the audience, including Will, laughed, but Jada rolled her eyes, kicking Smith's protective mode into gear. Next thing viewers know, Smith is up and storming the stage, slapping an unsuspecting Rock right in the face. Then Smith returned to his seat and yelled, "Keep my wife's name out of your effing mouth," twice. Rock was visibly shaken by Smith's reaction, as was everyone watching, but he laughed it off and kept going. Of course, the actor's actions did not come without consequences. Smith is now banned from attending the Oscars for a decade, and he resigned from the Academy. Smith could still win an Oscar, but he won't be able to accept the award himself. Truly an unforgettable moment at the award show, and truly a bad look for the actor. Number 9, sharing marriage problems. Will married Jada Pinkett Smith back in 1997, and over the years their relationship seems to have been on public display. There have been plenty of rumors of both parties being unfaithful at one point in their marriage or another, but in 2020 they were forced to clear things up. In July, singer August Alsina revealed in an interview on The Breakfast Club and alleged that he had a relationship with Jada a few years ago with Will Smith's blessing. He said, "I actually sat down with Will and had a conversation. Due to the transformation from their marriage to life partnership that they have spoken about several times and not involving romanticism, he gave me his blessing." The singer also admitted to giving himself to the relationship for years of his life, confessing to have really deeply loved her. Initially, Jada denied the claims that they had been together, as she would be admitting to cheating on her marriage. After denying it, they did a red table talk where they explained that they had actually separated. Jada referred to the relationship as an entanglement, and this episode is also when they revealed they were in an open relationship, clearing things up to hopefully prevent future rumors. At number 8, Margot Robbie rumors. In 2013, rumors began to go around that Will Smith had an affair with his Focus co-star Margot Robbie. At the time, neither Will nor his wife Jada had talked about being in an open relationship, so as soon as people had a hunch that the co-stars were getting flirty, the rumor mill was working overtime. They started after the two posed for a photograph, lifting up their shirts pretending to flash the camera. The photos appeared to be goofy and flirty, and people were suspicious. Robbie also made a comment about the actor's breath, aka when they had to kiss, saying he's got really lovely breath spray, also leading fans to thinking she was being flirty. Of course, Robbie and Smith denied the rumors, but people weren't convinced, especially seeing how it seemingly took a toll on Jada and their marriage. Apparently at the time, Jada was insecure about their flirty relationship, and this is what kick-started trouble in their relationship. Later, during a red table talk, Jada seemingly confirmed people's theories when she revealed that she harbored a racial bias towards white women with blonde hair. She said, "I have to admit I'm guilty to that to a certain degree because I do have my own biases, specifically to blonde women. Blonde hair on white women just triggers me." She claimed it was due to being bullied by girls like that in school, but people prefer to believe that she was talking about Robbie. At number 7, no punishment. The Smiths have always had a non-traditional parenting style which has raised eyebrows over the years, but in 2013 they faced some backlash. Smith revealed that he and Jada didn't believe in punishing their children, Willow and Jaden. Speaking with Metro UK, he said, "We don't do punishment. The way that we deal with our kids is they are responsible for their lives. Our concept is as young as possible, give them as much control over their lives as possible, and the concept of punishment, our experience has been, it has a little too much of a negative quality." Smith also said that they treat their children like equals, saying, "We respect our children the way we would respect any other person." Things like cleaning up their room. You would never tell a full-grown adult to clean their room, so we don't tell our kids to clean their rooms. Others might see their respect for their children as being a little too lenient and maybe lacking in teaching the children discipline, including Jada's mother, Adrian. During a Red Table Talk in 2018, she admitted that she thinks Jada and Will give their children too much freedom, telling her grandchildren that they had too much say in their own lives. At number 6, After Earth. One of the actor's self-admitted biggest mistakes for his career was doing the movie After Earth with his son, Jaden. People were excited for the movie to come out in 2013, as this would have been the first time that we would be seeing the father-son duo share the screen since The Pursuit of Happiness. Unfortunately, it did not end up being received quite the same. In his memoir Will, he wrote, "After Earth was an abysmal box office and critical failure, and what's worse is that Jaden took the hit. Apparently the press was vicious towards Jaden, and Smith wrote, I'd coached him into the worst public mauling he'd ever experienced. So not only was the movie a big failure, it also led people to think the reason for that was none other than Jaden himself." Smith also talked about how he could tell his son felt betrayed and lost his trust in leadership. At 15, Jaden even brought up becoming an emancipated minor, which Smith says, "When Jaden asked about being an emancipated minor, my heart shattered. He ultimately decided against it, but it sucked to feel like you've hurt your kids." The movie ended up receiving an 11% on Rotten Tomatoes, and critics tore the movie to shreds, making it one of the worst reviewed Will Smith movies to date.
Number 5, Martin Short. Comedian legends Steve Martin and Martin Short aren't just longtime showbiz besties, but they are also absolutely hilarious together, ever since they starred in the 1986 film Three Amigos. These two have been known for their fabulous banter. However, when they appeared together on The Tonight Show in 2019, they used the opportunity to rip into the host Jimmy Fallon, turning the interview in somewhat more of a Comedy Central roast than a casual late-night appearance with rapid-fire jokes aimed at the talk show host. Alleged fakeness, with Martin beginning the show by saying this is the greatest show on television because there is no host in the late night that pretends to care the way you do. I mean, no one captures phoniness the way you do, it's a gift. He would then take things a little too far when he went on to say that it was really rare that Jimmy's teeth looked so good even though he was taking narcotics. Short then went on to declare, "You prove that all handsome white men can make it in show business." Near the end of the roast, Jimmy just looked more noticeably quieter than he usually does, as he was trying to recover from all the hurtful things that were said so he can move along with the interview. Number 4, Louis C.K. Just once before 5 women accused him of making unwanted advancements was exposed by the New York Times in November of 2017. Comedian Louis C.K. was making his rounds on the talk show circuit to promote his Netflix stand-up special. He and Jimmy Fallon seemingly got along just fine at the top of his appearance on The Tonight Show that March. Well, that is until the host appeared to forget how to use his brain when Louis began the interview by telling Jimmy how much he loves to take naps. Midway through his rave about activity, Jimmy would ask him, "You like it better than sleep?" which it all took to leave Louis looking utterly perplexed. And then he went on to grace us all with the most epic side-eye before joking, "You really? That's stupid. You just said that. That was a dumb thing to say. That was such a dumb thing to say." The comedian then went on to rip into Jimmy further when he offered multiple analogies showcasing just why he felt like the question was so absurd. For his part, the former SNL star tried to save the entire situation through his rationality before Louis finally dropped the banter with a chuckle, asking him if he could just get past this part. Number 3, Ricky Jarvis. Notorious for his style of self-deprecating cringe humor, Ricky Jarvis admittedly has no filter. In a 2019 interview with the New York Times Magazine, the comedian explained that the notion of himself taking things a little too far is one of the things he does for comedy, laughing at the wrong thing because you know what's right, with its self-professed view of what's right and wrong, if that makes sense of what he said. Particularly through the lens of comedy, it should come to no surprise that the British entertainer immediately latched on to Fallon's fake compliments during his 2017 appearance on the Late Night Show. After the host began telling Ricky that he looked great, which was enough to send his guests into a long-winded rant about his appearance when he said, "I look great, is that sarcasm? You see, this is the thing with you. The talk show. Oh, you look great. Even though, look at me, of course I don't look great." The creator of the British version of The Office then hushed his hilarious 4.5-minute charade about weight gain with a string of profanity, causing Fallon to look away from the camera and playfully cut his gut off off so he could attempt to continue on with the interview. Number 2, Blake Shelton. It's hard to imagine annoying Blake Shelton as he's a laid-back country singer. However, when he nearly lost his cool when he appeared on The Tonight Show in 2017, he kind of lost respect from a lot of his fans, with Jimmy kicking things off by heckling Blake over his cover for his 11th studio album, Texoma Shore. With what began as a lighthearted humor conversation, it would turn Blake to have a furious moment. With Jimmy asking Blake what he was thinking and about the memories he was in, Blake would turn sour and he would try to keep things friendly, as the audience laughed as he would tell Jimmy he was wishing he was actually there instead of on his show. With the comedian not noticing the slight hint that Blake was trying to urge the comedian to move on, Jimmy began to bring up Blake's upbringing by imitating Southern accents and stereotypes. The voice judge looked semi-annoyed as the so-called joke went on and he refused to laugh at Fallon's sketch. However, after a couple more minutes of banter, Blake appeared to have enough and finally snapped at Fallon by saying, "Will you interview me for God's sake?" When Jimmy went on to finally interview the country singer, he would then seemingly mutter, "Thank God." It just seems like Blake isn't the type of person who has a good sense of humor, and Jimmy should have known better than to bring him on the show since he is the king of humor. Number 1, John Oliver. While he's famously engaging and animated with his guests, Jimmy Fallon appeared to tone things down a bit when he sat down for an interview with late-night rival John Oliver in 2018. When Jimmy asked John about his role as Zazu in the live-action remake of The Lion King, Oliver would say, "I'm a movie star. You respect me, Jimmy. I'm a movie star now, and some things are about to change around here." The British comedian then went on to discuss his experience singing the Disney classic, "I Just Can't Wait to Be King." Oliver then went on to brush off the production's note that he sang great and would become an ironic remark, especially considering Fallon's next move. When Jimmy turned his attention to Oliver's small role in his award-winning HBO show, Jimmy would start things off by saying, "The best title of any show ever." Without skipping a beat, John then responded by giving him a blank expression, saying, "The best title, wow, that sounds like fanning me with fake praise. Jimmy, I really love the title, it goes downhill once it's finished." But it seems like even if the two were not taking things seriously, that John was just a little too full of himself.
Starting us off at number 10, we have the unnecessary segment. So back in 2013, Jimmy went under fire for allowing a segment between himself and a group of children to air. In the skit, he was interviewing them questions they had no idea about, considering they're about 5 or 6 years old. He told them that America was in debt to China and owes them about $1.3 trillion, to which he asked what they think America should do in order to pay them back. One kid suggested mass destruction and a full which is wild because the kid was very young. Why does he know so much about violent things? Jimmy responded with, "Okay, that's an interesting idea." He then pushed the joke further, asking the rest of the children if Chinese people should live, most of them saying yes, except for the one kid who brought up the idea in the first place. After ending the segment comparing it to the Lord of the Flies book, this was obviously not received well by the immediate public. Jimmy and the ABC network ended up issuing a public apology, condemning their part in the segment's execution, and had it removed from all platforms, never to be rewatched from the public. At number 9, we have the inappropriate comments. Back in 2009, an interview he had with Megan Fox resurfaced. In it, she was retelling the time she was an extra on Michael Bay's film Bad Boys 2. She was only 15 at the time and was dressed in a bikini and 6-inch heels, which she had no business wearing around anyone, especially at her young age. The conversation was clearly going in a way that reflects how society and Hollywood preys on young girls for their sick need. Megan was trying to out Michael's inappropriate tendencies, but Jimmy instead defends it, saying, "That's really a microcosm of how all our minds work. But some of us have the decency to repress those thoughts and pretend that they don't exist." Yeah, maybe it was funny at the time when being mindful and not a weirdo was considered unfunny, but in today's age, this proved to be detrimental for Jimmy's career. Next up on the list, we have the Andy Dick and Ivanka Trump interview. It's always the interviews from the 2000s that tend to be the worst ones. In 2007, Jimmy had Andy and Ivanka on the show. As comedians, you're supposed to be funny, but what part of putting your hands on a woman on national live television is funny? Let's just throw being woke and progressive and all that stuff out the window for a second. That type of action is worthy of you getting thrown out or jailed. As Ivanka's answering one of Jimmy's questions, or trying to, she can tell Andy is staring at her the whole time, and he finds every opportunity he can to lay his hands on her. He asked if she puts glitter on her legs and proceeded to start rubbing her leg. Jimmy intervened while trying to maintain the lightness of the show, but he didn't stop. He ended up getting dragged out of the show by Jimmy alongside 2 other security staff. Now, regardless where you stand politically, he had no business touching someone without their consent. When asked about his non-consensual touching for an unrelated matter, he denied it and said it was just him being funny. But it was only last year when he was convicted for battery and sentenced to 90 days in jail as a newly registered offender. I guess it's not funny anymore, huh? At number 7, we have Quinta Brunson's acceptance speech. After winning an Emmy for the Outstanding Writing for a Comedy Series award, Quinta's moment was basically ruined when Jimmy, who presented the award, decided to perform his long-time bit with Will Arnett. He proceeded to lie on the stage throughout the duration of her acceptance speech. She didn't let this ruin it entirely, as she tried to play along and made him hold her phone while she spoke. She handled it with grace, but people were still offended on her behalf, especially her co-star Cheryl Lee Ralph, who called the act disrespectful. Later, she appeared on Jimmy Kimmel Live, where he was able to apologize to her publicly. She was also able to give her acceptance speech in full, which was honestly the least he could do for her. Fortunately for him, all was forgiven. Next up at number 6 is the Kanye West interview. Kanye is known for his radical political statements and beliefs, and not in a good way. In 2018, he appeared on Jimmy's show and was asked about his stance with Donald Trump, as he was often seen as an avid Trump supporter. Him admitting to it face to face was a way to stir the pot, and having it recorded was a plus. But this caught the rapper off guard, and he kind of just tilted his head and went silent. It was too short of an awkward moment. You might miss it because Jimmy quickly cut to commercial. I personally think it would have been funnier had he just let Kanye sit in that awkward silence a bit more. After his segment was aired, Kanye went on Twitter to clarify what happened. He said he wasn't necessarily stumped by such a question, but rather he just wasn't given an opportunity to actually answer the question.
Number 5, we have Chevy Chase. Hopes were definitely high when Chevy Chase was asked to host the 1988 Oscars, as the year prior he shared the stage with Goldie Hawn and Paul Hogan. And he did such an amazing job, so you would think that he would be able to host the award show by himself, but that just wasn't the case. Now, you know when a host opens a show saying, "Good evening, Hollywood phonies," you're definitely not in for a good night. And it just seems like Chevy, as the host that night, just kept dragging it on, and everyone watching was just praying it would all be over soon. Especially when he realized his jokes weren't funny anymore and they weren't getting laughs. He just turned to this gross humor, and it made us all cringe. Chevy got to the point where he was just acting completely ridiculous, like when he dropped his pants when Paul Newman took the stage to present the award for Best Actress. And when that didn't get the laughs he was hoping for, he just made some bad ad-libbing attempts, and he was seen picking his nose and sneezing into his hand, and that just wasn't funny. Number 4, Donald Duck. Now, there's probably a reason when you think of Disney characters, you never think of Donald Duck, and that's probably because he completely butchered the 1958 Oscar ceremony. So Donald Duck wasn't the only one who hosted the ceremony, as there was a handful of hosts that year. But it was Donald Duck's hosting abilities that definitely caused a huge amount of disappointment to come from viewers watching the show. So 1958 was a big year for the Oscars, as this was the first time the show had ever been broadcasted live. The Academy also sponsored the event, so that meant there was no commercials, meaning they had to hire multiple hosts, as nobody really had the time to take a break. Being that there was already 5 other hosts, you would think they would be able to handle things on their own, but the Academy was still trying to figure out how to throw something extra in there for us, so they decided Donald Duck. Maybe it's because they felt like they owed the fictional character a spot due to him being a former Oscar winner, or maybe they were just a little ahead of their time and wanted to get edgy by featuring a host who doesn't wear pants. But honestly, they probably should have known better, and it would have gone better if Mickey hosted the event instead. Number 3, Rob Lowe. After Rob Lowe's performance, it made a lot of sense to why the Academy decided to stick to a host-free format for years, as it was an attempt to make sure sure other award shows didn't turn out to be a complete nightmare like the show did in 1989. When Grease producer Alan Carr was put in charge of delivering an opening number, not only would he have Snow White in it, but also Rob Lowe. And when they took the stage, Rob would go on to sing and flirt with Snow White throughout the entire performance, but it also didn't help that he was introduced as Disney's character's blind date. Later, Disney's president, Frank Wells, would call out the Academy for this poor performance, and he would tell them that he was extremely unhappy for what they did with Snow White's character. Rob also would tell the New York Times, "Look, the Academy asked me to take the role, so I was a good soldier and did it. You can't be your own manager and agent and soothsayer. You have to take risks." But maybe you shouldn't have taken that one. Number 2, Neil Patrick Harris. In 2015, Neil Patrick Harris, who is known for his roles in the hit series How I Met Your Mother or the Harold and Kumar franchise, got a chance to host the Oscars, and honestly his performance as an MC for the event received a lot of mixed reviews, as his abilities to do the job just wasn't that great. Now, while the star's jokes were funny, as he is funny, he kinda pushed it a little too far as he poked fun at his own career. As the star then came out in his own underwear later on in the show to spoof Birdman and show off his songs and dance skills, with some help from Anna Kendrick. But the overall performance would have critics fuming, as they thought his opening was just bland. The only thing most people actually found enjoyable to watch weren't his jokes, but more his political speeches, as they were more entertaining to watch than his skits were. And if you prefer to hear about politics more than you want to watch a skit, you know there's a problem, because let's face it, no one likes politics. And coming in number 1 today, we have Frank Sinatra. So Frank Sinatra actually had the chance to MC the Oscars twice. The first time around, he got the chance to MC the event by himself in 1963, and he did an amazing job, so it wasn't really surprising that the Academy would ask him to come back to the show to MC again, and this time he got on the stage with Sammy Davis Jr., Bob Hope, and Shirley MacLaine. However, his second time as an Oscar host was definitely a tense one, as during this telecasted event, he and his co-host faced some major controversy when filmmaker Bert Schneider read a telegram from a Vietnam diplomat. This then prompted angry viewers to send in telegrams of their own, so mid-show, after fighting with Shirley about making his own statement, Frank would take to the stage to read a disclaimer by Bob Hope, in which he said the Academy was not responsible for the political views that were expressed on the program. But when it comes to politics, sometimes it's just best not to say anything, as people take these conversations very heavily, and it drives a lot of us nuts. Starting off our list today at number 10, we have Chris Rock. Not only did Chris Rock destroy his career in 2022 with his horrible Oscar hosting job, you think the Academy wouldn't have hired him to host the ceremony, as back in 2005 he had another pretty controversial show, as not only did he make a comment about straight black men never watching the Oscars only a month before the show, he actually tried to cover it up by stating the LGBTQ community only watches the Tonys, which would cause a handful of people to call the star out and urge the Academy to replace him as the host that year. But still, the show went on with him as the host, and to be honest, his opening monologue just wasn't even that funny, and his whole performance was just really bland and loud. And if things couldn't get any more worse, later in the night things got extremely awkward, as Chris went on to make a comment about Jude Law when he said, "You want Tom Cruise, and all you get is Jude Law." The statement didn't sit well with a few people in the crowd, and when Sean Penn then took the stage to present Best Actress, he would then tell Chris Rock off and say that Jude was one of the generation's finest actors. Number 9, Anne Hathaway and James Franco. If one thing's for sure, Anne Hathaway doesn't deserve to be on this list today, but because she had to MC with James Franco and he failed at his hosting job, she unfortunately has to be on this list today. From the very beginning of the night, it looked like James just didn't want to be up on the stage, and he was waiting for the whole event to be over, which was strange, as you think the actor would have been a little more excited, as he was also nominated for an Oscar that year, but he still didn't want to be there. So to make up for his co-star's lack of energy, Anne had to try her best to keep the show afloat. Unfortunately, tipping into her over-the-top energy caused a lot of the viewers to cringe. But I still don't know what's worse, the fact that they had zero chemistry on the stage, or the fact Anne opened up the ceremony by saying, "My gosh, you're all real." Later, James would even acknowledge how bad his presence was by telling David Letterman, "I've thought about it. I think I know why I bombed. I love her, but Anne Hathaway is so energetic, I think the Tasmanian devil would look stoned standing next to Anne Hathaway." Hey my little peaches, are you liking this video so far? If so, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to that channel. Number 8, Seth MacFarlane. To be honest, I don't think any of us could really understand why the Academy would ask Seth MacFarlane to host the Oscars in the first place, as his brand of humor in his Family Guy show is very controversial. So they should have known that his performance was going to get on a lot of people's nerves. Now Seth definitely proved that he could sing when he performed in his opening number, but he chose to do it in such a controversial way as he decided to write a very misogynistic set that revolved around seeing actresses who have stripped down on scene for their roles, as Seth went on to sing about how he has seen certain actors' chest. He then went on to mention everyone from Meryl Streep and Naomi Watts, and you could see their faces all fall in the heartbreaking slow moment. He also enlisted an entire choir of men to help him humiliate the woman he named in his song, and when the cameras finally panned over to Charlize Theron, her unimpressed face would say it all. Not to mention, he also went on to make jokes about how women were getting themselves sick just so they could stay in shape for the award show, as well as cracking jokes about the infamous Rihanna and Chris Brown altercation, which just wasn't cool. Number 7, Ellen DeGeneres. Ellen's first Oscar hosting gig in 2007 was an utter mess, as it was nothing like the lovable performance she put on in 2014. Maybe her first time around was just missing all the selfies and pizza. However, with saying that, it isn't really Ellen's fault her performance as a host didn't do so well, as prior to hosting the Oscars, she previously hosted 3 Emmy Awards, and she did such a great job doing so. So when the Oscar ratings were down, the Academy brought in Ellen so she could bring in a different demographic, but by doing so it seems like it was just a little too forced, as she just kept rambling on and her points just fell very flat throughout the night. Even her overall style didn't seem to fit in with the Oscars, and there was a point where she even mentioned the Oscars was going green and that she was going to recycle some of her old jokes, and she actually took that to heart. It seemed like she made the night a little too much about herself and didn't really focus on the films and the actors that were up for consideration that night. Number 6, David Letterman. It's no lie that David Letterman was at his peak in 1995, but just a couple years earlier he was actually passed over for the Tonight Show gig that was vacated at the time by Johnny Carson. So David instead went to sign his own deal for his own show on CBS, and he actually was beating Jay Leno's late night ratings by a decent margin, so he became the perfect choice to lead the Oscars, well, after both Whoopi Goldberg and Billy Crystal declined to host the event first. Now David has always had this very dry sense of humor, and it didn't exactly translate well when he was hosting the Oscars, with his opening monologue being extremely boring. To listening to Uma Thurman and Oprah's opening skit was also just very odd and out of place to watch. David just couldn't get his style of work to fit in the right way like Johnny Carson did before him. It also didn't help that he also told the audience at one point to pay attention. At the end, David took all the heat he was receiving in stride, and he even went on to make fun of himself when he returned to his regular job by saying the Oscars even asked him to perform again. Crazy.
In at number 5, Robert Downey Jr. Back in January, Mexican filmmaker Alejandro Gonzalez stated he was aware Robert would not be apologizing for a formerly offensive comment made about him. 7 years following Robert's initial remark about Alejandro's English vocabulary as a native Spanish speaker, the cinematic creator informed The Independent that he wasn't holding his breath for Robert to step forward with remorse or any apologies, saying, "Of course not. I honestly could not care at all. I'm completely against what he said, but I will defend his right to say whatever he wants. Anything he wants to say is fine, but for me it reads completely the wrong way." Robert's comment took place back in 2015 after Alejandro expressed his negative feelings about Marvel movies to a reporter. In response, Robert chastised in a separate interview for a man whose native tongue is Spanish to be able to put together a phrase like cultural redacted just speaks to how bright he is. September 2022 is when Alejandro decided to initially address the infamous comment, speaking with IndieWire's Eric Kahn and stating, "It was like, oh, you guys from your banana country. If I were from Denmark or Sweden, I might be seen as philosophical, but when you're Mexican and you say things, you're pretentious." In at number 4, Bill Burr. Bill is a comedian known well for being a controversial kind of entertainer, often landing in hot water for things spoken about during his stand-up comedy appearances. His most controversial, arguably, comes from his Saturday Night Live stint. While opening up his monologue, the comedian quipped some rather interesting remarks, according to The Hollywood Reporter. He ranted about cancel culture at the start, expressing expressing how it went so far as literally running out of people to cancel. They're going after dead people now. They're trying to cancel John Wayne. It's like God did that 40 years ago. Further in, Bill also called out white women who he felt, quote, hijacked the woke movement. Bill explained that it was supposed to be about people of color not getting opportunities they deserve, while also arguing how that changed in a blink of an eye. By the end of his spiel, Bill got into Pride Month, questioning why the month felt a little too long to celebrate the community. Quote, for a group of people that were never enslaved, how did they get all of June? His argument also pushed a detailed comparison of how black people have a mere 28 days of overcast weather during February. He closed off with the words, how about you hook them up with July? In response, which came quick and plentiful, one Twitter user explained, how about you not pick hosts who say things like gays weren't enslaved, even if his joke is to point out black people suffered more. And at number 3, Tom Segura. In March 2023, an article was posted describing the fire Tom and his wife, Christina Pazitsky, underwent for claiming that the use of washcloths when showering is a poor person's lifestyle. Of course, the two were widely criticized amid the mini clip from the podcast going viral. Their washcloth comment kicked off a massive hygiene-related discourse regarding cleaning habits, with numerous people pointing out the podcaster's ignorance, blatant racist undertones, and dismissive attitude about the situation. On Twitter, various users bashed the couple for their public admissions of being unhygienic and unclean, especially given Tom's mentioning of not washing his feet or legs and not using a washcloth overall. And at number 2, Leah Remini. Scientology, a topic I knew would eventually come around full circle on this channel. Naturally, when we hear Leah's name, it's the first thing that comes up because not only is it her most controversial career aspect, but speaking out about the topic also heavily affected her time in Hollywood. As for Leah, one's whole life is sacrificed to becoming a member of the practice known as Scientology. On top of this, some other facts, according to Leah, are that Scientologists are cruel to reporters, and their church refuses to accept psychiatry as a valid practice. Their leader, David Miscavige, has faced various accusations of being mentally and physically manipulative, and the practice has been blasted for their allegedly desperate devotion to keeping their celebrity members, again, according to Leah. Of course, some of Leah's other allegations have leaned more on the serious side that we just can't get into, but let's just say the response to all of it hasn't been well. And in at number 1, Alex Jones. Yes, the conspiracy theorist who pushed the theory of the violent Sandy Hook tragedy being staged. On top of this, Alex has had some other rather controversial public statements. While some are incredibly crude and out there, others fall on the side of arguably weird and odd, including the government and their supposed weather weapons. Yeah, I know, but stay with me here. Alex isn't just a believer of the secretive forces working to control people's minds. Oh no, he's also been a lifelong warner about the government's speculated efforts to completely control the weather for their alleged personal agendas. During a 2013 broadcast, Alex claimed there was weather weapon stuff going on, as per a Media Matters produced transcript. In a broadcast over that summer, Alex insisted there was weather-based modification going on.
Starting off our list today, in the number 10 spot, we have Pete Davidson. Saturday Night Live star Pete Davidson made his Tonight Show debut in 2018 to chat about his short-lived engagement to his then-fiancée, Ariana Grande. The interview started off easy enough though, with the comedian gushing about the relationship. However, when Fallon suggested that the late night show itself would be a perfect place for the Hollywood duo to get married, Davidson clapped back by saying, "Why do people care? It's very weird. It's weird cause like, the president's trying to pardon himself," and he then went on to make a reference about Donald Trump's affair with Stormy Daniels. The audience responded to the remark with some scattered laughter, while Jimmy himself laughed it off but looked a little bit uncomfortable. Davidson then went on to throw a couple more profanities throughout the interview. Finally, Jimmy told Pete that he couldn't say those words on live television, and then he jokingly told the comedian he was fired from the show. Pete then went on to tell Jimmy that he didn't care and he would just go on the Seth Meyers show, before stating that he had Seth's number but not Jimmy's. Jimmy then quickly retorted by saying, "And you're never going to get it either." The entire exchange was then met with shocking howls from the studio crowd. Quickly, Pete and Fallon's awkwardness together made for such a comedic gold moment that NBC appeared to excuse the former verbal hiccups and gave him the green light to return to the show. Number 9, Lea Michele. When Jimmy Fallon welcomed former Glee star Lea Michele onto The Tonight Show back in January to discuss her Funny Girl Broadway debut, Michelle wouldn't be be the only big name star on the show that evening, as the Whale and Stranger Things star Sadie Sink also joined Jimmy on the sofa for a chat. But when the primetime talk show invited the two to take part in a game of charades, some eagle-eyed fans claimed to spot a rather awkward moment after they pointed out that Leah pushed Sink out of her way. The moment then came after Fallon welcomed the two to come on from behind the scenes, and she awkwardly stood in front of Sadie before Sadie moved out of the way so Leah could slide into her spot. Leah also cut Sadie off when she was making her way to the sofa. The outcome of the episode would then have fans talking and smashing Leah on various social media platforms as they labeled her to be an actress that was a rude, mean girl. Number 8. Cardi B. Cardi B is just as well known for her over-the-top demeanor and trademark catchphrases as she is for her catchy beats and overall lyrical flow. So you think that before Jimmy brought her on the show, he would have done some research on what he should have expected when bringing the Bronx native onto his show in 2017. Equipped with all her signature sounds and quick-witted jokes, the Bodak rapper was indeed in full Cardi B mode. The problem? It looked like Jimmy didn't quite know how to handle her unique energy, which made for an awkward interview that left some fans cringing. At the start of the segment, the artist had already begun with her strange noises, which Jimmy seemingly attempted to ignore at first, after he asked Cardi B about her NYC upbringing, to which she responded by saying her signature sound, leaving Jimmy to simply just sit there in silence before taking a sip of water. As the interview went on, he appeared to fall more and more into this hilarious groove with the rapper, but the whole thing just came off as a pretty uncomfortable moment, as Twitter users even put it. So entertaining for Cardi, but really awkward for Jimmy. Number 7. Shawn Mendes. Singer and Canadian Shawn Mendes had not one but two pretty uncomfortable appearances on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, with the hitmaker who first went on the show in 2016 to help the host with his #fall song segment. But just as Mendes was finishing the second song, he would call Fallon out for giving him a late cue for beginning his singing, before making a number of jokes in order to point out the comedian's age. While the audience went on to laugh at the first joke, it would quickly stop as Shawn went on to throw similar verbal blows Jimmy's way, like when he told the host that he sounded like his grandfather. The joke was then met with awkward cricket sounds from both the audience and Jimmy, and it totally gave off this like really cringy vibe. Somehow Shawn was able to return to the show 2 years later, and he would go on to open up about his performance with Justin Timberlake at the 2018 iHeart Music Festival. Jimmy then heckled his guests over who Justin might just like more as the banter continued on throughout the interview. Things progressively then got a little bit more awkward, as Jimmy's final move to squash the playful beef was to share his infamous over-the-top laugh. Number 6. Donald Trump. Jimmy Fallon's interview in 2016 with Donald Trump would leave countless Americans disappointed and enraged. With the Tonight Show host keeping things pretty lighthearted, he did his best to avoid pushing any political buttons. However, he did finish off his interview with a notorious piece of resistance after he playfully messed up Donald's wig, with the move bringing Donald on the show being widely criticized, eventually costing Fallon 21% of his audience by the following year, as fans were furious with the host, to point out he would later admit in the Hollywood Reporter Awards Chatter podcast that days following the incident, it was a downtime for him and he was very sorry as he didn't want to make anyone angry. Donald then came out to accuse the host of just whimpering before claiming that Jimmy just needs to be a man already. By 2019, The Tonight Show would then bounce back with top ratings, but it seemed like for Fallon's image, it still remained somewhat tainted. Previously had a bit of a feud with his Fresh Prince of Bel-Air co-star Janet Hubert, who played Aunt Viv originally on the show. At the end of season 3, her character was taken over by Daphne Maxwell Reid. Following her departure, Smith gave the reason that she was difficult to work with, but there was more to the story. Truth is that Hubert had been pregnant and experiencing trouble at home, while also dealing with a young Smith who, according to her, had an issue with her not kissing up to him. To top it off, Hubert claimed that her salary was cut, forcing her to leave. When she did, Smith said in an interview, "I can straight up say that Janet Hubert wanted the show to be the Aunt Viv of Bel-Air show. She's basically gone from $250,000 a year to nothing." When asked about a reunion, Hubert said, "The reunion thing will never happen in my lifetime unless there is an apology," which he doesn't know the word. Eventually though, they did sit down with her explaining, "I lost everything. Reputation is everything. Calling a black woman difficult in Hollywood is the kiss of death." In the end, Smith was apologetic, but being young with money and fame like he had ended up being a dangerous combination. At number 4, Scientology rumors. Both Will and Jada Smith are believed to be connected to Scientology. In 2011, Smith told Men's Vogue, "I've studied Buddhism and Hinduism, and I've studied Scientology through Tom Cruise, and nobody's saying anything
anything different. These comments earned him a good deal of backlash, especially after he claimed that 98% of the principles are identical to the principles of the Bible. In late 2018, he said that they have never been Scientologists during a Red Table Talk, but that they have also been tied to a school which was a front for teaching Scientology. The New Village Leadership Academy started as a homeschooling operation in one of the Smiths' vacant mansions in 2007. Between 20 and 30 children were educated inside Will and Jada's home before they opened a school on the nearby campus of Indian Hills High School. In an interview with The Sun, Associate Dean and Engineering Professor from California State, Dr. Jawad, who was also a guest robotics lecturer at NVLA for 2 years, claimed that the teachers at Smith School were put under pressure to include Scientology education models in their classroom. Jawad also claimed that many of the full-time staff were openly members of the church. He said Will and Jada may have denied it, but there was definitely a drastic tilt towards Scientology in that school. At number 3, lost it on a reporter. Back in 2012, Smith made headlines for slapping Ukrainian reporter Vitaly Siduk in the face. Smith was at the Men in Black 3 premiere in Moscow. In the video clip of the altercation, you can see Smith standing and answering questions to a crowd of reporters and cameras. When the actor's time is up with Siduk, he goes in for a hug, which Will enthusiastically accepts. Then the reporter, who is also known to be a prankster, did something that honestly has a good chance of getting you slapped most of the time. Siduk kissed Smith's cheek, then he went for another, and if Smith hadn't turned his head, I think he would have landed the second kiss on Smith's lips. Now, of course, kissing someone without their consent is not okay, but Smith decided to hit him. Initially, Smith pushed the reporter off of him, followed by asking him, "What the hell is your problem, buddy?" This is the point where it would make sense for the actor to just walk away and have someone remove the touchy reporter, but instead, Smith steps back to Siduk and slaps him on the cheek with the back of his hand. The reporter was definitely not right for what he did, but Smith also showed that in response to a problem, he's not afraid to lay his hands on someone. At number 2, leaving the Academy. When it comes to who wins at the Academy Awards, all the decisions are left up to the Academy of Motion Pictures and Sciences. The Academy's corporate management and general policies are overseen by a board of governors, which includes representatives from each of the craft branches. To become a member, it's not just a simple application, there are lots of requirements and rules before you can be considered. Of course, with his long career, Smith had finally made his way to be able to be a part of the Academy and had the power to vote for Oscar winners. Unfortunately, he threw the honor away last year after slapping Chris Rock in the face live on stage at the actual award show. Not the best look for anyone, but especially a respected Academy member. Of course, following the event, he received a hefty ban on attending the show, but along with that, he resigned as a member. He said, "I betrayed the trust of the Academy, so I'm resigning from membership in the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and will accept any further consequences that the board deems appropriate." Losing his invite to the event and his voting privileges in one night was not good to his career. And at number 1, trouble with the law. The actor was arrested back in 1989 over an alleged vicious attack that took place in Philadelphia. According to the report, Smith, who was 20 at the time, was arguing with a man which became physical, resulting in the man almost losing his sight in one eye. The man was record promoter William Hendricks, and it went down days before Smith received his first Grammy. When all was said and done, Hendricks was left needing 6 stitches after fracturing his left eye orbit in the fight. At the time, sources told the National Enquirer that Will had to spend the night in the cell at the West Philadelphia police station, with other inmates waking him up all night to ask for an autograph. I know a lot of people are young and dumb and make mistakes, but it's clear that Smith has been turning to violence as the solution for his anger for a long time. The slap may have been the first time he hit another person live on TV, but it's definitely not the first time he got in trouble for hitting a person. At the time of his arrest, he faced charges for aggravated attack, criminal conspiracy, and recklessly endangering another person. In the end, the charges were later dismissed, but charged or not, he still used violence as a solution.
As we like to do with these videos, to really understand how someone got to where they are today, we must first begin at the beginning. She was born Jenna Marie Ortega on September 27, 2002 in Coachella Valley, California. From a young age, Jenna has been in the spotlight and only spent a few years in grade school before getting her first critically acclaimed performance as a younger version of the titular Jane in the series Jane the Virgin from 2014. But like many young actors, Ortega got her first regular series gig on the Disney Channel. She got it on the show called Stuck in the Middle, where she portrayed Harley Diaz, as the middle child of 6 siblings. It was one of those shows where the main character would break the fourth wall and address the audience to share their childlike wisdom with the viewers around the world. Now, while the show wasn't the most popular in the world, she herself won an Imagine Award for Best Young Actor in Television for her performance in 2018. Being a child star meant that she didn't have a normal educational experience, often regretting never actually attending a normal high school or experiencing the traditions that come with it. Filming a scene set at a prom versus going to an actual prom are two very different things. Despite this, Ortega has been able to power through and has maintained a steady stream of work ever since her Disney days, on both the small and big screen. In recent years, she stepped into the horror genre, and many fans have accepted her with open claws. Her most memorable role was in the slasher flick X, in which a group of actors making a movie that is not safe for work in rural Texas are caught by the owner of what they assumed was an abandoned farm, and the crew begin a fight for their lives. She was also recently responsible for reviving the much-loved Scream franchise in 2020 and its sequel in 2023. With roles like this and a passion to perform, it only makes sense that Jenna should be given a show. 8 episodes to showcase her talent in a dark and creative space. Enter Wednesday. The character of Wednesday Addams first creeped into existence in 1946 thanks to the wild and wacky mind of one Charles Addams. That's right, Tim Burton didn't create the concept for the show, and if you didn't know that, wait till you Google who made The Nightmare Before Christmas. The Addams Family first started as a series of cartoons published in The New Yorker, which is a famous news outlet, in the 1940s. The cartoons followed the adventures of a creepy family who find themselves in wacky and fun situations. For 20 years, Charles brought that family's dark and twisted sense of humor to the readers at home, and he garnered quite the fan base because of it. In 1964, a multicam sitcom was produced to bring the Addams Family to life and right to your family at home. In the first iterations of the cartoon, the family had no names or specific character traits per se, so the show gave writers a chance to develop new characters based on an existing property. The show premiered on September 18th in 1964, and the rest is history. The world was introduced to Mother Morticia Addams, Father Gomez Addams, son Pugsley Addams, Grandma Addams, who never actually has a name, and the family's 7-foot-tall butler Lurch, and of course, the devious daughter herself, Wednesday Addams. The show was hailed for its family dynamic and weird but fun style of humor that it presented to viewers. It ran for 64 episodes for just over 2 years, which was a pretty big deal in the 1960s. Eventually, the series was rebooted into 2 live-action films from the late 1990s that many people watching this video may remember best, because they were fantastic. And if you haven't seen those movies, pause this video right now and go find them. Mamushka! Mamushka! Since then though, the property has changed hands a few times, with some rough live-action reboots of both the movie and the show in the early 2000s, as well as an animated film reboot of the franchise in 2019, which, yeah, let's just not get into that one. But the Netflix masterminds finally found a golden nugget when they not only bought the rights to the Addams Family, but they hired the king of the comedically macabre, Tim Burton himself, to produce and direct. Tim is famous for movies like Beetlejuice, Corpse Brides, Mars Attacks. Okay, he's not famous for that last one, but he really should be because it's freaking wild. Tom Jones fights an alien in Las Vegas. Just saying, if that doesn't make you want to watch that, I don't know what will. Burton was beyond excited to take the job and found his Wednesday in Jenna Ortega. Jenna was Tim's first choice from the get-go to play Wednesday after seeing her stint in the horror genre, as well as her comedic abilities from her Disney days. Jenna accepted the position and has portrayed the character for only 1 season of the show so far, but oh boy was it a good one. Literally, the series focused on the titular character as she moves to a new school filled with misfits and monsters, and as it turns out, mystery! Oh yeah, and in the show, Wednesday gets like psychic visions or something like that sometimes. It's kind of like That's So Raven, only Wednesday like collapses to the ground and Raven just kind of stares at you. Regardless, the show was the perfect mix between mystery thriller and dark comedy, and it had wonderful mystery elements. They were so well done that myself and the people watching the show with me enjoyed all 8 episodes in succession at midnight. It was a bad idea, but so worth it. The show premiered #1 on Netflix, not just in Canada, but in the entire world. It stayed at that #1 spot for 5 weeks, and in that time smashed Netflix viewership records and became the 2nd most watched show on the platform, just barely pulling up behind Stranger Things. The show was renewed for a second season only 2 weeks after the final episode was released. That season may take some time to get off the ground, however, due to the current writer's strike taking place in the States, as well as some choice comments made by the actor in reference to her Wednesday screenwriters. Throughout production on Wednesday, Ortega had reportedly been uncomfortable filming some of the scenes that were written for her character and would regularly change the parameters of the script. One of the most glaring flaws in the Wednesday series, I think we can all agree, is its decision to focus on a love triangle between Ortega, a boy at her school who is a misfit, and a normie boy in the town nearby who, spoiler alert, is also a misfit. He's some kind of like Jekyll Hyde weird monster thing. It heavily distracted from the point of the show and tried to make us care about something that the character of Wednesday wouldn't even care about herself. This is why Ortega made several comments to the writing team and was quoted as saying that she would punch up the script more often than she expected to. She cut several lines that made no sense for the character and altered the overall love triangle storyline to help focus more on Wednesday and her friends. Jenna fought the writers back and forth on the issue, but she won that battle as it was discovered by the team working for season 2 that the show would drop that concept entirely. No more love triangles. We're gonna focus more on Wednesday's Nancy Drew-like escapades with some Addams Family flair mixed in. Unfortunately, even the smallest comment can be used to fuel the flames of anger, as several signs among the Writers Guild picket line are covered in quotes from Ortega and slogans, including one that says, "Without writers, Jenna Ortega will have nothing to punch up." While a large portion of writers find her comments and input to have been a negative move in their eyes, many writers have also gone the opposite route and have claimed Jenna as one of their own, claiming that punch-ups are still writing too, with one person even tweeting Jenna Ortega better get back from New York for her afternoon shift on the picket line. The writers' strike is entering its second week of protesting after beginning on May 1st. The last time a major writers' strike took place like this was in 2007, and that protest went on for 100 days, costing the film industry nearly $2 billion. With fury and frustration surely looming on the streets, Jenna's comments, while more than likely playful, have been used to get a point across to the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Production. The main focus point of the strike is the residuals and streaming of media. The AMPTP, they really need to work on that acronym. Share of the residuals from streaming platforms like Amazon and Netflix has cut much of the writer's average income compared to a decade ago. They also ask that artificial intelligence platforms like ChatGPT should only be used as a research tool to help facilitate new script ideas and not as a replacement for them entirely. The demands are very understandable, as you can't replace the art that a human being can produce with AI garbage that's just mashed together for you to pick apart and edit. Unfortunately, having Jenna's name on this sign means that her name is now being used in a negative way, and she could be caught up in a strike that she didn't even start. With the strike comes a massive pause in filming, leaving not just the writers out of work, but the actors and crew as well. Was Wednesday's first season going to be its last, and will the dragging of Jenna's comments through the media mud be enough to officially ruin her career?